why don't we go ahead and get started, and people can still trickle in. So this talk is going to be on how to implement a predictable revenue system. How many of you are familiar with the book called Predictable Revenue by Aaron Ross? One person? How many of you are B2B companies? Or okay, most people. All right, great. Well, then I will tell you what predictable revenue is. So my name is Elizabeth Yin. I run the Mountain View Accelerator here. I'm a partner in 500 startups. But in a past life, actually, I had a company myself called LaunchBit. And it was a B2B ad company, essentially. And I'll talk more about that later. And we went through the batch as well. We went through batch number 2. I am an engineer by training. I went to Stanford to study electrical engineering. But for LaunchBit, I mean, my co-founder, who was also an engineer, like it was the two of us, we had, you know, nobody with a sales background. So I learned to become a salesperson. And while at LaunchBit, I personally sold somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million of ads myself. And this is going from, oh my God, sales is really scary, to, you know, implementing a sales system, if you will, not just me, but other people's sales system, where we could repeatedly get sales. So what I'm going to be talking about today is a combination of topics. One is basically all of the learnings that I had from running the business side of LaunchBit and how we sold and how we acquired customers. But also, because we were selling to other B2B companies, we sold ads to B2B SaaS companies, I got to learn how they all ran their companies and acquired customers. And so today's talk will basically be all of my learnings from both what I did as well as what they did. And these are a handful of our customers that we sold to at LaunchBit. We worked with New Relic, RJ Metrics, SendGrid, MailChimp, Sencha, Atlassian, Freshdesk, HubSpot, and many other B2B SaaS companies. So actually, let's start by making this interactive. Does anyone know what lead gen is? Like, I had no idea what this phrase was when I started LaunchBit, honestly. Does anybody know? Does anyone know what a lead is? What's a lead? Yeah.
A lead is just a potential customer you might have, and then they're referred to by somebody, or they might be just off the list.
Okay, a lead is a potential customer, but can you get more specific? Like, what does this look like? Is it a person standing at your desk, or a phone? Yeah.
Someone who is willing to buy and able to buy.
Someone who's willing to buy, okay, and able to buy. But I guess let's get even more specific. Yep.
When you build your personas, I mean, there's a certain person you're targeting, and the lead is somebody that fits in that persona. You have all the contact information, and they're the people that you stick at the top of the funnel.
Okay, people you stick at the top of the funnel. But like, let's say that I ask you for 100 leads. Like, what would you give me?
Email addresses or phone numbers, or even probably as broad as names.
Okay, email addresses, phone numbers, names. Okay, great. I think the combination of all of this makes sense. So let's pull it all together. So tell me, like, just from scratch, shout it out. If we were starting a B2B company today and we were going to take a bunch of leads on one hand, just very generically, and we were going to turn them into sales later, what should I do? This is very high level, very theoretical, but we'll dive into the weeds. Yeah.
Approach them and tell them how your product or company will help them.
Approach them. So who's them?
The leads.
Let's back up. Where am I going to get the leads?
So where do you get the leads?
Well, there are different methods. Everybody has their own. So
Yep. So let's shout out some methods of getting leads.
we'll go to LinkedIn and see what are the best logical people and reverse engineer their emails and just reach out to them.
Okay. So we'll do LinkedIn research to find some people who fit your criteria.
Right.
Reverse engineer emails. What other ways?
Buy leads or get leads referred to you.
Okay, buy leads, and again, you're talking about emails, phone numbers, and what else?
Conferences?
Meeting them at conferences.
Conferences, so you're collecting what, business cards?
Business cards.
What else?
Inbound leads.
Inbound leads, what do you mean by that?
To collect your email list, writing blogs, collect emails, newsletters, what are you doing?
So let's talk about blogs. How am I going to get leads from my blog?
by collecting emails.
Well, so you maybe have like a pop-up email thing on your blog or something, subscribe to my blog.
Subscribe to the newsletter.
Okay, so email subscription. Other ways. Yeah.
Like a webinar, and you get collect emails through a webinar.
Webinar. How would I get leads from the webinar?
Advertising on a newsletter that's industry specific.
Okay. So actually, I'll break that up. I'll talk about ads. Maybe you write an ad for a webinar, but it could be for other things too. Could also be a white paper. Yep.
Partnerships.
Partnerships. Elaborate.
So you can work with another company where you share similar clientele,
Okay.
and then you can exchange lead data.
So you could do cross promotions with somebody else with a similar audience. What would you cross promote as an example?
You would each sell each other's products to see, or promote each other's stuff to see who from your list collects interest, and then share that with each other.
Okay, so cross promote, say on my email list, I promote somebody else's product, they promote mine, some sort of deal like that. Could also do it for the webinar signups too. Anything else?
It could just be existing customers who maybe invite their colleagues or friends into the app or something like that, or recommend something.
Okay, I think somebody earlier said referrals. Referrals from current customers. Maybe there's a special code, somebody gets a discount, you get a discount, whatever. Any other methods?
Distribution partner. Like if somebody already has an existing sales team and they're selling a complementary product to yours, you know, you can get their sales team to refer their customers to you to complete their solution.
Okay, I think we said sort of cross promotions. This is another, I guess, form of cross promotions. Like they're selling multiple products, maybe. Yes.
Might qualify under research, but it's great.
Yep. Okay, we'll put that with research. Like all of this is kind of similar. Okay. Anything else? I mean, there are tons of ways, so I just kind of wanted to cover some of the basics. Okay, so we've got a pretty good list of different ways that we can now get leads. But I think what I want to do here is like almost further segment into two categories. So there are outbound leads and there are inbound leads. And we've talked about both. So outbound leads are basically people you are hunting, and inbound leads are people who have expressed interest in coming to you. This is how I'll loosely define it. So outbound, when we talk about researching people on LinkedIn, scraping, those are examples of outbound leads. Buying email lists, phone numbers, again, outbound leads. And the rest are pretty inboundish. Like at conferences, people throw their business card in the fishbowl, that's sort of inbound. Email subscribers, they come to your blog, they read your blog, they sign up to your blog, inbound. Same thing with webinars, white papers, etc. Ads also, they clicked on your ad, they signed up for something or other. And referrals, again, like friends referring their other friend who then come to you. So all inbound. And so for today's talk, I'm mostly going to be focused on outbound. Inbound's like a whole nother beast. And I'll tell you why in a second. But let's so I'm erasing these other channels, but they're not bad channels. It's just we're only talking about outbound today. So let's focus on these channels. So, all right, all of these activities are sort of similar. You research, or rather, so you have a research stage. And now let's say that I have a really nice list of email addresses, like some, say, long spreadsheet. Now what do I do with them? We want to go from that list to sales. Yep.
Probably begin to maybe enrich them with more information. Maybe they just have a first name and last name. And to actually send an email, you need to know some other personalized stuff that helps, maybe.
Okay, enrich with information. They may or may not have that information that you're looking for already, like on LinkedIn, maybe there's a ton of stuff and you sort of are searching for their email addresses. But, okay, so let's say that we do enrich this information. What would be the next step? Qualify them. What do you mean by that?
So look at them and see how big is the opportunity with each of them. Just get more understanding of what can segment them.
Segment them. So how are you going to qualify them? Like what specific activity are you going to do?
I mean, one part would be just looking at them and figuring out how big opportunities are each of them. Other could be reaching them out and see if they respond if they're interested.
Okay, so one is just looking at your list and sort of, I guess, prioritizing, we could call it. Anything else?
We'll know
Oh,
they're-
here. Oh, sorry, here and then back.
Get them on the phone.
Get them on the phone. So what would you do?
To do that,
Yeah.
if I have their phone numbers, then call them.
Okay, let's
And I
say.
already have like a preset list of questions.
Okay, so let's say you do have their phone number. So we are going to call them now. So reach out, I'll call it. And you said you have a list of questions.
Right, but I don't ask them in order all the time, and I don't ask all of them all the time. But,
Okay, so you call them up, and what's an example of a question you ask?
what's the project you're working on right now? And like, is there a problem with the way that you're collecting data, a way to improve that?
Okay, so learn about relevant problems.
Right.
Anything else? Yeah.
I just realized that before we did the research, I would have scripted the messaging and the potential objections and the precisely what's the thing. If I was to pick up the phone, like hi, like what, right? What precisely is the thing, and what could be the objections, and what could, if you don't know that, maybe you could answer them like on the fly, or you know what your message is, maybe.
Okay. So
I'm not sure if that's before or like maybe.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think just in general, we should probably prepare before we do anything. But, okay, so we prepare before we reach out. Like, what are the potential objections? How could they answer the questions? What things could crop up on the phone call? But let's say we're on the phone call. Let's say we've done great preparation, and we're on the phone now. We were able to get through to them. So lots of assumptions here. And we're learning about their problems. Now, what do we do? Yeah.
I think first, I mean, what you haven't stated yet is what the goal of each phone call is, right? So, I mean, is it to get a sale? Is it to, validate your persona, or, validate the market? Before you do the phone call, you have to figure out why you're doing the phone call.
Okay, yep, we need a goal for the phone call. So what's the goal?
Well, it depends on where you are. If you're, if they have a product you thought about, and you're trying to figure out what market segment to target, then you're basically just validating your hypotheses you have about a certain market segment, and that's your goal. But if your goal is just if you already know that segment, you already have a repeatable a sales cycle that already worked, then you're trying to close it on the sale.
Okay, we'll go to Ben in a second. So the ultimate goal is we would like to sell to them where they're sending us money. And some people in this room I know can actually sell per your product on the phone, like get them to actually pay you on that first call, and that's great. But other people in this room, that first call isn't going to do it. So I realize that the goal is going to be different for different people. But for your business, whoever is answering the question, what is a reasonable goal by the end of the first call? Ben, did you want to say something, or we're going to go? Okay.
Our goal is to do a product demo, sir.
Yep.
Okay, so there's a goal to do a product demo. Is there anything else?
I was going to say that work will even play for a product demo.
Okay, great. And I think that's a reasonable goal for many of you. All right, so how do you get to that? How do you get them to agree to a product demo?
You understand, you ask questions, you understand what their issues are, try to map what you do.
Uh-huh.
Basically be able to tell them that you have some problems.
Okay.
Some questions are asking them before you start getting something that you can actually solve.
Okay, great. So they lay out all their problems, and we basically come in and say, actually, our product can help you with all these things. Are you when do you ask for the demo? Is it on the same call or the next call for your business?
On the same one.
Okay. So going into the demo, now what do we do? Let's say we're in demo mode here.
Well,
Yeah.
if you track back to what they told you, I mean, the demo may be tailored.
Yes.
So again, prep, right? So maybe,
Let's assume that we knew they were going to ask for and knew that the demo was going to happen in this call, and that the demo is created for them.
Further understand their needs, see if the product makes sense for them.
Okay, so you're going to start showing them the demo. Remember also we're on a call, so how are we going to logistically show them this demo?
Screen share.
screen share.
Okay, could screen share. Okay, so we're going to screen share. So we've also presumably all sent over the logistics around the screen sharing. And what are you going to show? I mean, your product, you could go on and on about your product for an hour.
Just exactly how it solves their problem.
Okay, we're going to show them the pieces that solve their problem. And let's say that we get through all that. How are you going to end this call?
Call to action.
What's your call to action?
Free trial.
Free trial?
Could be.
Okay. So how are you going to make that come about? Like you are going to...
Give them a trial email link and an email afterwards.
So you're going to set them up with an account? Or... Okay. Yes.
Maybe set up a follow-up sequence as well, not just like one thing, but like over the next few weeks you commit to trying this out in a proper way, and then.
So set them up with some sort of drip campaign, is that what you're saying? Or
Yeah, kind of.
like onboarding sequence?
Yeah.
Okay. Other ideas? All right, let's say that we get off the phone and, we're sending them these onboarding emails that had the free account, but nothing is happening. Has this ever happened to anybody? This has happened to me a lot. Yeah, so what do you do?
No, I had a question, just a question.
Yes.
We talked about qualifying that lead.
Uh-huh.
Who's that lead? Is it just a guy within that organization? Is it a champion, or is it going to be a decision maker?
Yeah, so we skipped a lot of steps.
We skipped a lot of steps.
And we'll go back, but so there are basically two ways actually to qualify leads. I think in the beginning when you're doing research, you have to do the initial filtering, which is, what is the title of the person you're selling to? What is the type of company? Are they like, 50 to 200 person company? What is the revenue size, et cetera, et cetera. So there's that initial qualification. You should do it and come up with a list of everybody who is relevant to that qualification. Later on, though, however, there's another set of qualifications which is around sales qualifications. Like, are they actually going to be close to buying?
Right.
And that you won't know until you basically hop on the phone with them or something to that effect. But we'll talk more about that in a second. I just kind of want to finish off this exercise and then dive back into the presentation. All right, so we're having a problem onboarding. What do you do? Yeah.
This is more theory than my personal practice. Create a sense of urgency.
Create urgency by...
For those laggards who
Well, we've already given them a free trial.
They're just stuck there. They don't want to pay. They're just happy.
Well, so it's interesting because actually in B2B, price isn't always like a motivating factor. Like if you are working at this company and somebody says, oh, I'll give it to you for like 50% off or for free, it's not your money. Like how much do you really care?
Monitor engagement.
Monitor engagement? What do you mean?
See if they're using the product, if not, call them, see if they're having problem using the product. See if it's actually solving their problem.
Okay.
Because they use it, they try it.
So in this hypothetical case, they're not using it. They haven't done anything. So you give them another call and they say, oh, I'm so sorry. I haven't gotten around to it. Now what?
I usually get real hands-on and try to do a lot of the set. Usually they don't get onto it because there's setup involved or friction. So
Yep.
I try to just alleviate as much friction as possible and build momentum and get it rolling. And kind of
Okay.
yeah.
So remove friction, such as maybe on the call this time around, or even the first time around, you help set them up.
Yeah, exactly right.
So you start working on the product with them. Maybe if it's, say, an ad campaign, in our case, you set up the ads for them, etc.
Yeah, you go a bit more hands-on.
Okay, go more hands-on. Okay, that's a great idea. How are you going to get them to buy? Let's say they're using it and it's going okay.
I think maybe they're not using it for some reason, but they won't say that reason just openly. Maybe it's something that. So I always find things like saying like, what would have to be true for you to do this thing? Kind of sometimes helps bring their guard down. And maybe it's like my boss will pay, it's not me, or something. So somebody else gets involved, a group buying thing happens, or like some other reason that like they haven't revealed. We don't even.
Okay, so you need to figure out like what their inner thoughts are, and one way is by asking them,
what would have to be true for you to, you know, begin with it, using this in daily life? Like
what would have to be true in order to move forward or begin using this? Okay. Anything else? No? Okay, well, so let's kind of move on. So this is sort of like we zipped through this pretty quickly. But as you can see, there are actually stages here. And that's kind of one thing that I wanted to bring up in this conversation. That one of the ways to scale up a B2B process is actually through specialization. So the thing that, I don't know where this slide's going. One second. Yeah, so the thing that, tying this back to the book, and we're going to dive more into these steps in a second, is Predictable Revenue is essentially a book about this process. Now, the thing about startups is, in the beginning, when it's just, say, like you and your co-founder or a handful of people, you're basically trying to do all of these steps, like, all hacked together, like, nothing is very organized. But at a certain point, actually, probably at the stage where many of you are, it's time to get organized and put a process around it. And the key to doing that is realizing that actually each of these is a specialized step. In other words, like you can have one person or many people just focused on the research and enriching lead stage. You can have somebody else or many people just focusing on the outreach stage. It could be calling down a list. It could be cold emailing. Then after that, you could also, I guess we didn't say it in so many words, but the demo stage could be a separate stage as well. Like if you're doing outreach over email, that would be one stage. This could be the call stage. You could have a stage here, and you could have somebody, the closing stage. Whatever it turns out to be, and obviously it will be slightly different for each of your businesses, the important thing to recognize is that you need specialization to really scale up this process. And the thing is, if you don't specialize, it actually really hampers your business. I don't know how many of you face this problem, but when I was running LaunchBit, the initial way that we got started was I was researching a bunch of different people or contacts on Google and LinkedIn and whatever, and putting together spreadsheets. Then I was cold emailing these people. Then I was hopping on a phone call with these people. And what my week looked like was I was, maybe spending a day researching and sending out maybe like 10 emails a week, and then getting on the phone with a couple of people a week, and that was my week, and plus all the other things I had to do as a founder. I don't know if anyone else has had this week. Does anyone else have this week? Okay, this week is really, like that type of week is very inefficient. Like you'll always be on the hamster wheel. And I don't know why this is on. Do we have a power? And so you're always going to be on a hamster you're always going to be on a hamster wheel with this kind of process unless you start adding other people. And so this book, Predictable Revenue, basically talks about that. I would highly recommend checking it out from the library or buying it. I have a copy floating around somewhere as well. And essentially, Aaron Ross, who ran the sales process at Salesforce, said, create specialization at each of these steps, and it will be cost effective and it will help you scale up. Because what you basically are doing then is, whenever there's a bottleneck, if there are not enough leads to reach out to, you hire more people for that stage. If there are too many people to do phone calls with or demo calls with, because you can only do 8 demo calls a day personally or whatever, you hire more people to do demo. And so that's a really interesting insight. And we'll talk more about that tactically later in the Upwork section of this. But I think the other thing to realize here is, as I mentioned, this talk is all about outbound. And one of the reasons why I really like outbound, even if it's not the process you end up using later on, is that for earlier stage companies, it really helps you get feedback. Like when you're talking on the phone with your customers, like you can get a sense of actually whether this is going to be a good fit for them, whether it's actually solving a problem for them, et cetera, and can kind of help you navigate whether you have the right product. LaunchBit was actually not the right product in the very beginning for our customers, and it was through these phone calls, these demo calls, where we started learning about how people run their ads in general, how people do customer acquisition in general, all their different processes to try to better fit our product to what they are actually doing in their life. It also helps you understand what messaging to use, because the words that your potential customers will be using on the phone are basically words that you want to be parroting back in all of your messaging materials, whether it's your white paper or webinars or anything else. And then lastly, I think a lot of people complain just in general about how customer acquisition is really expensive, but outbound, at least in the beginning, can be really cheap. Now, a lot of people think, how could it be cheap? Like salespeople are really expensive, like what are you talking about? But this is where we'll talk about some of the costs in Upwork. Surprisingly, an outbound sales process can be cheap, and even if the lifetime value of your B2B product is not super high, like if you're an SMB B2B product, this could even potentially still have a positive ROI for you. No longer do you have to be an enterprise B2B company in order to make outbound work. I would say that just as sort of a weird generalization, if your lifetime values are in, say, the low thousands even, this could even work for you. Maybe not the hundreds, but low thousands of dollars, this could work for you. And we'll talk about the mechanics and ROI of that in a bit. Okay, so let's talk about ROI. Like, how would you measure the ROI of an outbound sales process, like what we just laid out? Like, how would you think about that?
Like,
yeah.
If it's email lists, obviously it's like cost per email, whether it's Upwork, someone scraping, or buying a list, or some unit cost would be just the raw cost of the lead, right?
Yes, okay, so raw cost of the lead, whether it's the time of an Odesker or the cost of the list, so there's some cost here, let's say cost per lead. Okay, and then what? Yes?
Cost to generate a meeting, how many meetings lead to a sale, therefore the total cost of the sale.
Okay, yep, so essentially the cost of people here to generate the meeting and to do the demo sort of in this process, and then how much you're making here at the end on that sale. Okay, so it's fairly straightforward. Hopefully everybody could follow that. But essentially, if, let's say we are sending 100 emails, there's the cost of getting the 100 email addresses, there's the cost of who's going to be sending them the emails, there's the cost of doing demos to say 10 people of that 100, and then finally of the 100 people, let's say that one person buys and they are paying you, I don't know, $1,000 for the year. Was it worth it? What was the whole cost of all of that versus the $1,000 for the year, et cetera? That's essentially what we're looking at. Okay, good. All right, so now let's talk about just the research stage. And the reason is, I believe there are other speakers who have talked with you about cold emailing. Tarek is coming in to talk about cold calling. And so these other stages are more or less taken care of, but happy to chat with you guys later if you want to chat about any part of this process. So I think one of the biggest problems that B2B companies have is they don't have enough leads to begin with. Because like what I just laid out for you, this scenario, you reach out to 100 people and one person ends up closing, means that you need to have those 100 people to begin with, just for one sale. So how are we going to get all of these leads? And traditionally, the way that people have gotten leads is like a few ways. We've already talked about buying lists, and we've also talked about doing research, etc. And I think, how many of you have heard of the position like sales development rep? A handful of people. So in the early stages of, or in the top of funnel stages of a B2B company, traditionally when folks have been hired to do things like do research or whatnot, oftentimes companies have hired, people locally here in America. And salaries around here, even if you're taking an entry-level job, can be expensive. And I think that's one reason why a lot of folks discount an outbound sales process, because it seemingly is very expensive. But these days, you can actually hire much cheaper folks to do research around leads. And so the question is, how do you do that sort of in this global economy? And so let's say that we wanted to create this job just at this stage. Like how, basically to help us pull together a really, really long list of potential leads who would be good to reach out to. How are we going to do that? Yeah.
We actually use Upwork for this.
Okay.
It's a Google
great.
spreadsheet. And each spreadsheet is a campaign. Like we target this customer base, and maybe it's a LinkedIn search that goes with it. The person on the Upwork side usually has a premium LinkedIn account, so it's not me actually going through the profiles. And then there's a Chrome extension called CloudText or something.
Sorry, let's take a step back actually before we talk about tactically what they are doing. How are you going to find this person? How did you find
them?
Yeah. How did you decide who to hire on Upwork?
Yeah, that's a pain in the ass.
Well, that's what this topic is.
Yeah. I just Skype them. So you do a Skype. So if they just sound like they're crazy, then you just skip. But if it's somebody reasonable sounding, who is also responsive on Skype, carry on. In our case, they're all in the Philippines. But they have to be kind of responsive. And we're not going deep on them. We just need to know that they'll deliver.
So let's rewind the clock even more. How did you first decide to Skype with a certain subset of people?
Posted a project.
Okay, so you posted a project.
Yeah.
And you said what?
Amazing award-winning startup looking for amazing award-winning lead gen.
Okay. Butter people up and yourself. And okay, with this job, and what was in the job description? What did you want people to do?
Efficient, able to do this, has done this before, and understands what we need as a startup, and can do it efficiently. So job description type of thing, but something like that.
Do it being like lead gen.
But we never specify what it is because competitors do watch LinkedIn Upload jobs. So it's we'll tell you on Skype what it actually is.
Okay.
But then I've tried a new tactic recently, which is have you done jobs for other people? I can buy those lists from you. So instead of paying per hour, it's I'll just buy a list of you.
Okay. So I guess the takeaway there is you look for people who have done this before. Maybe you buy their work from before, or maybe it's basically just per their experience, you trust that they know what they're doing.
And the Upwork profiles how many hours they've done, the feedback.
Okay. Then what? Okay.
So we listed data entry, lead gen, email address acquisition as the top 3 things, and then we have we can find a directory of prospects. So we're looking for media agencies. So you just Google media agency directory, and there's some form out there that lists them all. Then for every prospect who replied to our job posting, we're saying, okay, do the first 5 on that list, get us the email address, title, and name of those 3 people, submit your 5 leads, by the end of the day, and this is kind of your test to see if you're worthy of enough for us to hire you or not.
Okay, so Linked sets up test projects, essentially, here are some instructions on how to do research, and this is what we're looking for. And then you on the flip side, you're looking for people who have data entry experience, etc., to do these test projects. How many people are you hiring for this test?
We're still figuring that out, to be honest, but generally 1 to 3.
1 to 3 people, hiring 1 to 3 people with the hope that one person might come through?
Again, we're still figuring all that out. We
Okay.
need to understand how many leads we need in order to convert to a sale. We're still getting that metric.
Yep.
So
Okay.
if it's 100, then we need 1 person. If it's 1,000, then we need 3 people.
Okay. Still figuring some things out. All right. And how are you paying for these tests?
We're not. It's part of the interview process.
Okay, you're not paying for the tests.
Yeah. So
Okay.
it's only 5 email addresses they have to collect, right? So.
Okay, got it. Other ways that people are currently hiring, either on Upwork or Craigslist or any other source, for this type of role.
Same thing, but we pay them for 50, and then
50 leads.
50 leads, and then give them the same kind of criteria, like who we're kind of looking for within an organization. We don't get specific as to giving them names of organizations. We just give them industries, and then we kind of spot check the 50 to see if they're any good, and if they're any good, we might proceed forward. We're still figuring it out also.
Okay, so generally there's a test, search for 50 people who fit a certain criteria, etc., and then kind of go from there. And I'm sorry, how did you say that you pay them?
We pay them for the 50.
You pay by the hour, or you pay by 50 for per email?
Most of the people have been by the hour so far.
Pay by the hour,
And
okay.
so and that's kind of another part of the test, is to see how long it takes them.
Okay, so you're testing on time as
Yeah.
well as accuracy or whatever you want to call it. Okay, yeah, so I think similarly at LaunchBit, we did this sort of thing. So on Upwork, we would create a test contract. We actually made it a very distinct job as opposed to part of the interview process. And I think one reason is if the work turned out good, we actually wanted to use it, and we wanted to make it a serious gig, if you will. So the test contract was actually very similar to what Workfleet is using. Essentially,
Guess what? I stole it from somebody else.
essentially, it was, we want you to come up with X number of leads. This is the criteria we're looking for, and we were very specific around criteria. Like, this is the title of the person we want to reach out to. We need their email address. We need their name. Like, no email addresses that are like info at or hello at or anything like that. The type of company needs to be in this range, like this size, making this kind of revenue in this industry, etc. So being very, very specific around what it is we were looking for. We paid generally, well, to begin with, we paid actually by the hour. You could pay for performance to limit your losses, but I think for a test contract, it's simple enough and small enough of a test to pay by the hour. Like, if you expect this project to take 1 or 2 hours, it's really not a big deal to pay $20 or whatever. We also hired multiple people to do the same job because it's very difficult to know whether somebody's doing a good job or not, except in comparison to other people. So we would actually hire many people, like 5 to 10 people, and we would try people from different places. So on Upwork, you can, hire people of different geographies. You can, hire people obviously at different salary levels, which may or may not be correlated with geography. And of course, like what goes along with geography that you'll need to consider is how much does knowledge of English or your local language matter to you? I think that we found, for this project actually, it didn't really matter. But for other projects that we had, English did matter. And so when it came to hiring people specifically to, research email addresses, we actually hired a number of folks from the Philippines, and they had good command of English. It wasn't perfect, but it was good enough, and they were great. But I think for other tasks that we had later on, we actually needed Americans because it involved writing, emails and customer support and all that. So I would take a look at that as well as your testing people, because you may find actually great work outside of the U.S. or anywhere else, and at better prices as well. So that's actually one factor in terms of why I think this outbound process is now much more accessible to many different kinds of companies. Yeah.
Did you find that you had to like purchase LinkedIn Premium for them, or did you see that people generally had that, or that wasn't kind of a factor, or what was?
Yeah, I was actually surprised that your Upworkers is now what it's called, have LinkedIn Premium. We purchased it, I think, for brief periods of time and then cancel for them, but we didn't realize that some people had it already. And maybe this is something that's changed. I mean, keep in mind, when we were doing this, like, Upwork was not even Upwork, it was like Odesk. They've since merged with Elance and whatnot. So maybe people are more sophisticated on there now to get business. And let's see, so we talked about, and then the last thing is, you don't have to use Upwork. I mean, this is just what I personally used. But I know a lot of other folks who have used other platforms. Amazon Mechanical Turk could be a good platform for you if your task is very specific and the deliverable is very specific, such as an email address. But if you need people to say, do customer support or customer success or something like that, that may not be a good source. Craigslist is also good for hiring folks on a contract basis and whatnot. Yep.
You said you hired multiple people for the same,
for the test, yes.
But if they're all looking at the same thing, you have to reconcile the information. Like someone's made a spelling error here and someone else hasn't, that kind of thing.
Yeah, sorry.
Same information.
To clarify, not the exact same test. So we obviously tried to make it as similar as possible, but we didn't want overlap amongst people. So we basically would say, to this person, like, we're looking for people who are directors of marketing in these industries, etc. But for another contract test, it might be a different industry or it might be a different size of company, so slightly different specs, so that there wasn't overlap. And then also, just to be clear around this test, the idea was to actually only hire maybe 1 or 2 people. So we definitely did not keep most people. We went in with the attitude that actually, most people will not make the cut. And we were very specific also in our job description that this is a test, and you can, potentially this will lead to something much longer term, but we made it very clear that this was just a test. And I think we've already kind of covered some of this. You want to be very specific around your roles and titles of your leads. Where should the Upworker mine your leads? Should it be on LinkedIn or Google? Like, give them some sense of what has worked for you before, and also what email addresses are acceptable, like are hello at or info at email addresses acceptable, etc. And then lastly, I think,
Either you or everyone here, can they give a range of how much it's costing per lead?
The question is, how much does it cost per lead?
Yeah, through whatever process you use. Like, if we have to compare, should we just go and buy leads versus like do all this work?
So we've tried both. We have also purchased lead lists. I think one thing to factor in if you're going to do that is figure out how many of them are actually legit, because like not most, but a significant number of leads we found with those lists were just not good. They were outdated, incorrect, or whatever you want to call it. The other thing is, there's no like one way to do it, so it may be a combination of different methods, because in the end, you're going to just want to get as many leads as you can. Hope that answers your question. I think in terms of the price, like, honestly, it's going to vary for everybody, because some of you have much smaller markets. For us, we were selling ads, so anybody who is a director or marketer who is buying essentially online, etc., like that list is really big. So I would say, and also many directors and marketers buy ads from multiple people. It's not like, you go with our product or somebody else's. You're going with ours and maybe 10 others. So for us, our leads were relatively cheap, but I think that the way to think about it is not about cost of the leads, but more about, does it fit with what you're making? Like, what is the ROI on the sales process? Because if it is, you should just buy like all leads that end up with this. Like, this is how you scale. Like, anything that fits within that ROI, you should just buy. Like, even if some leads are more expensive than others, like if they all fit your ROI, you should just buy them. And then lastly, around the test, like you should set it up such that this is a really speedy test. And I think that's actually where Upwork is really good, because you can hire people just like that, and you can know within a couple of days whether this is working out or not. And I think traditional hiring methods of trying to find a local SDR, sales development rep, is like, well, you have to go and find something on Craigslist and interview them and whatever, and that could take like over a week for sure. So this is another reason why I really like places like Upwork. Okay, so diving into Upwork specifically a little bit, you can, when you get to Upwork, you get a screen that sort of looks like this, where you can upload your job description, you can say how you want to pay, anything else you want to mention, etc. And again, I think a couple things to emphasize: try different locations, try different price points for your tests, and then also messaging. This is just a test for now, but it could lead to something much more long-term if it goes well. Then lastly, at the end of the test, like, again, what was the ROI on the test? Don't think of it in terms of like, oh, that lead was more expensive than this lead, etc. But overall, like, is this working out for you? And like I said, the nice thing about this is you don't need to feel pressured to hire anybody. Like, if nobody works out to your liking, like if you are not really excited about any of the people that you're working with, then don't hire anybody, which I think is sort of a different mentality or attitude than if you were to hire somebody, you know, say locally through more traditional methods. You may feel like, well, this person is pretty good, I'll keep them. But you don't need to have that attitude here. Like, you just go and do another test with another 5 people if it doesn't work out well. And then lastly, tying it back to this process that we talked about. So I imagine that for many of you in the beginning, the biggest challenge will be around leads. Once you get so many leads such that you, as say the CEO, like you're bogged down with so many demo calls, then you'll think about hiring other people in here. But I imagine that you probably will ultimately need to hire more than one person for this lead stage. There is definitely no hard and fast rule about this, but plenty of 500 companies who've been through this program before have gotten to the point where they're sending like 1,000 emails a week. Now, obviously that will really vary a lot on your market. Maybe there aren't even 1,000 people in your market, but just to kind of give you a sense of like, yes, you can scale up to that many people that you're reaching out to in a week, even if you have just, you know, a couple of people working on growth. So I just kind of wanted to plant that seed in your head, that that's kind of the level of where you want to be. Maybe not the 1,000 per se, obviously depends on your market, but that kind of level. And that concludes my talk. Does anyone have any questions about anything? Yeah.
On a very high level, does this process ever integrate with your pirate table, or should the pirate table only ever be really used for inbound selling?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
So, does this method here of research, outreach, qualified demo, can you copy and paste this into your pirate table, or should you use your pirate table for only inbound selling?
Can you tell me what the pirate table is?
Sorry, the acquisition.
Oh, our metrics. Yeah.
Our metrics.
Yeah. Oh, I see what you're saying. Does it map into pirate metrics?
Or keep these two things separate?
Yes and no. So there's some overlap. But like when you get, like, there are some pieces of like retention, for example, that doesn't
apply,
quite factor into this process, because the process that what we talk about here is the initial sale. We didn't talk about upsales and customer success. That's like another can of worms. If you were looking at your sales process more comprehensively, we would probably draw out more steps for like upselling your current customers, etc. In which case that would map on. If that makes sense. Any other questions? Yeah.
So, if you wanted to segment this a little bit more, I mean, could you go ahead and do this whole process for the lead generation, but then plug like a sales development representative into the first part of the outreach process. So taking those leads, using an email client or something like that to send them out, and then even having them qualify the leads in some way, or I guess expanding on
Yeah.
that a little bit.
Yeah, so the question is whether you can use an SDR for, say, let's call it outreach.
Or would that, what kind of position would that, would that fall under an SDR, or is that something a little bit
Yeah.
more advanced?
Yeah, you could also call it an SDR. So what I would do though is I would have separate people. So whatever you want to call it. If you want to hire somebody for outreach, and we did that on Upwork as well, and you definitely need a little bit more command of the English language for this step because you're going to be interacting with customers. Again, here, if you want to hire somebody for outreach, let's say you're doing cold emailing, you want to queue it up for them as specifically as possible. These are the templates you're going to use to reach out to these people under these circumstances. And when they write back, like you're going to schedule with like this kind of template, schedule demos for Ben or somebody. And so, but this is a separate role than researching. Like you need specialization. Whoever's doing research should just be doing research all day, every day. It's going to be super boring, but like that's all they should be doing to maximize efficiency. And you'll probably need multiple people doing that. And then have a separate person to do just the email back and forth, like sending the initial email, the coordination, to schedule a phone call, let's say, or a demo with you or whomever. And I would highly recommend, at least for the beginning, if you, as the CEO or the business person, if you're doing the demos right now, like continue doing the demos and get this stuff aligned before trying to bring in other people to do the demos. Any other questions? No? Oh, yep.
You said you had Upworkers later, like the local people who sent emails out and stuff like that. Do they have to be trained to really know how to answer questions and then come back at that advanced stage? Like they'd outdo the outreach. Then someone will say, "Oh, I have a question about your product," so they'd have to know your product really well, right? To answer that.
Yeah. So we hired a woman who is like in the middle of, I want to say Tennessee. I could have it wrong, but in the middle of somewhere in America to help us with that kind of thing. And she didn't have a tech background. She didn't fully understand her product. But we essentially had to build out an FAQ for her, and that took time. Like there was a lot of hand-holding in ramping her up around questions, because if she didn't know the answer, she would shoot me an email, I would pull together an answer and put it sort of back in the FAQs. And eventually that's how she kind of got going, to be able to answer probably 90% of inquiries. That definitely took time. Any other questions? Was there one in the back?
I was going to ask it, but I think it's dumb. I was going to ask you, have you ever had any success like just going into someone's office and trying to talk to them for a little bit? Have you ever tried that?
The question is if I've had success going into someone's office, and I haven't tried that, honestly.
Yeah, it's a little bold, but yeah.
So I think it could work. I think the main thing is we were trying to basically get this process to scale as much as possible, and so that makes that a little bit trickier. Surprisingly though, also a lot of our customers were international. Like you would think, I guess from the list that I showed you, most of those companies I think are in the Bay Area, but we had, like Fresh Desk for example, they're in India, and we had a couple of Israeli companies. So it was just, we wanted anybody from anywhere, and that wouldn't have been possible. Any other questions? Okay, thanks. Oh, sorry.
Did you email them from your company's info email address when reaching out for the first time, or the Upwork person actually uses their personal email address after someone replies that it will see yours?
Good question. What email address are you using? The question was whether you use an info@ email address. So we set up set up personalized email addresses for our Upworkers so that it seemed like they were part of our company. So like Martha at smallco.com or whatever.